Welcome to this instalment, which is actually episode 8 of the Building Blocks podcast with Pagabo, with me, Gerard Toplass, the Group Chief Executive of Pagabo. And if you hear any background noise today, it's because I'm recording this in Manchester at the Suez Recycling Annual Conference where I've been speaking today. The Construction Playbook and Build Back Better initiatives have already placed sustainability, net zero, and a change in best practice at the forefront of what we do in the built environment. And the UK will host the 26th UN Climate Change Conference of the Parties, which we call COP26, in Glasgow between the 31st of October and the 12th of November this year. Now, we hope COP26 will strengthen global action, provide a strategic vision, and hopefully allocate sufficient resources for solutions. Now, in episode 2 of our podcast series, we discuss net zero in the construction industry. So 1 year on, what's changed? Now, today, to help us discuss that, I have with me Julia Barrett, the Chief Sustainability Officer at Willmott Dixon, and Jose Hernandez, the Director of Everard. And we're going to be discussing what COP26 is likely to cover, maybe what it won't cover, and what this could mean for our industry. So, good afternoon, everybody. And to kick things off, I'll ask you both, what do you know about COP26 and why it is so important to our industry? Julia.
Thanks, Gerard. COP26. Well, at its most fundamental, it's just another conference. It's the 26th conference of those countries that committed back in, I think it was back in Kyoto a long time ago, anyway, to start tackling climate change. And really, for the first 23 conferences, not a lot happened. And then we had COP24 in Paris, where the conversations changed from, is climate change happening? To everybody saying, actually, it is happening, it is man-made, and we need to do something about it. And you'll remember coming out of that, there was the midnight oil was burnt, and an agreement was published where every country said, we're going to sign up with our nationally declared contributions as to how we're going to achieve emissions reductions to limit global temperature rise to 2 degrees. And only, it was less than a year later, the numbers were rerun and everybody said, oh no, that needs to be 1.5 degrees. So that's all fine, but here we're coming to COP26 in Glasgow, and we've got all the great and the good coming together again. But not everybody's even made their promises, explained what their contributions are going to be. And really this conference needs to be where we turn those commitments in action, start taking the first steps. So that's a bit, perhaps a politician's answer, taking us from the history to where we are now, yeah. Gerard. But that's my understanding of it, and why I'm very hopeful that we will start seeing action as a result of it.
That's great. So Jose, from Julia's great summary there, do you want to add anything to that? And do you think, the first 24, the first 23 conferences were more talking shops, and do you feel now we're moving into an area that we're going to actually see some action?
I think we are. I hope I'm right on that. It's certainly, I think it's critical. It's fundamental. We need to see actions, and a lot will depend on the outcomes of this conference. We can see it's very well covered already in the mainstream media. I think in the construction industry media, it's everywhere. I cannot count the number of emails and newsletters and so on that are making reference to COP26, to net zero carbon, to climate change. So there is a high level of consciousness and awareness of the issue, and it's very important for the construction industry, but in the first place because it's important for the world. And therefore it's important for us. And we've had, recently other panels like the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, setting a code red for humanity. Recently, 1 or 2 days ago, also the Environment Agency warning on natural disaster deaths that will also happen here and elsewhere. And I think that it's critical that we see this as an opportunity to decouple absolute and relative carbon emissions from economic growth. Both are possible, and indeed we need that. I've been a bit concerned to read this morning that last year global emissions may have reduced by 6%, but the forecast for this year is an increase of 4%. So we just need to make sure, that some of the reductions that we all know why have taken place over the last 18 months remain, and we take some benefits if possible from that.
Okay, so that's that's another great summary, and I just want to dig now into a point you said, Julie, which I thought was very interesting. The 26 conference. So there's obviously been 25 other conferences. So what's different this time around? I mean, sustainability has been on the agenda for 26 years or for 26 conferences. Now, is it different this time as the pandemic changed things? What about the recent weather extremes we're seeing? Is it a change in young people's attitudes? What do you think is actually going to really foster a big change this time?
I think it's probably all of the above, Gerard. I mean, I think COP24 in Paris, there was a massive sea change, and the arguments changed. And immediately after that, if you remember, we came out of Paris, and then we had a year of Greta, speaking truth to power. And I, like many other people, have probably watched the documentaries on her. I mean, what an amazing young woman, speaking from the heart, telling us to act like our house was on fire. Very simple language, very direct, very powerful, because she writes, she's still with us, of course, writes all of her own speeches. And she was doing her year of UN conferences and getting great exposure and really exposing the issue. And then I think very sort of overlapping with that, we had David Attenborough and some of his documentaries, and people started to see what we were doing to the planet, we were doing to the marine environment, the pictures of turtles with plastic around their necks. And people started connecting with this in an emotional way as well as a factual way. So the IPCC report and the Code Red for Humanity, that the report we've just had, everything's starting to align, hearts and minds. And I think this has just built up a head of steam now. I think we've seen the press and the media no longer hiding behind this nonsense of balanced reporting. Actually it's happening. There's an acceptance it's man-made, and the linkages are now being made in the media as well, with understanding the difference between climate and weather. And actually we've had so many of these horrendous events, whether that's excessive rainfall and flooding. We've had the fires in the US and in Australia, and the facts are that these are becoming more prevalent. They're becoming bigger in impact. They're becoming more frequent. So, and it's all getting a bit close to home. You specifically mentioned COVID. I think COVID has advanced the agenda in as much as it's shown how quickly we can respond, and how it showed how, particularly in terms of something that probably everybody listening to this will relate to, travel. We stopped traveling, and 18 months ago I was sat in a meeting with one of my senior managers and senior leaders in the organization, and he said to me, "Julia, why did you never tell me that I could save all this time, all this expense? I could increase business efficiency by us using IT and virtual meetings and virtual working." And of course, Gerard, I can see you're smiling at me on the screen. I know this is sound only, but of course my answer was, I did, but you didn't want to hear. You were giving me all the answers of, I've got to see the whites of the customer's eyes, or it's all about relationships, and it's all about, and we know going forward, this is a hybrid. But what COVID did was it took the choice away, and it forced us to change. And I think that has been one of the most positive legacies that we will get out of COVID.
Yeah, I think it just I like your summary on that, the COVID. And the other thing is, I think it's quite useful to sort of remember, our industry will know this, that as an industry we actually responded very well to COVID. Probably better than most industries. I know, obviously, if you were in hospitality, you had your challenges. So that that's not the point I'm trying to make. The point is, as an industry, I was extremely interested in the way we came together. Everybody came together. There was a lot of work with the CLC through government, but the industry itself actually responded very well. And I think, if that can happen again, at the point you're making about climate change, because there's loads of statistics about climate change and construction. Concrete represents about 8 or 10% of the world's CO2. We contribute heavily in what we do. So if we can bring that response together collectively, I think that could be very good. Jose, what sort of things are you trying to or hoping to see from COP26 that will carry on this sort of move towards everybody working on this?
I think a key aspect is going to be the agreement between all countries, and between all countries is of course needs to include the most polluters, the richest countries, the impact that has on all countries, including the poorest countries that will have less resources and will be more severely affected. I think a key element is going to be those financial and financing agreements at an international level, in the same way that, as Julia mentioned, COVID as an issue, I think that has in a way brought us all together. Climate change, there is a deeper sense of realization. We are all on this together, and it needs everybody to chip in and certainly avoid by all means a race to the bottom. This is not about a race to the bottom, it's a race to the top, and it's a race to the top that we have to get there all together. Further discussions and agreements on carbon reduction targets and pathways. I think that there has been also realization of some of the huge financial and financing risks ahead, and that includes people with large real estate portfolios, insurers, financial institutions, pensions. Everybody, I think, that realizes the risks. Some of them may only be focused on the financial elements of that. As long as they take action, I'm fine. I'm fine with that. And an agreement of moving away, as many countries are already doing, on some of the most pollutant fuels and that are affecting the natural resources across the globe.
Yes, that's products and the like. I mean, Julia, you work for a contractor, a very successful and large contractor. Just talk me through some of the examples of possibly ways you're changing what you do, and maybe the processes or even technologies that you're introducing. Modern methods, for example, is being sort of talked about a lot, particularly in the playbook, and that has a very good positive impact. But talk to me about some of the things you're doing at Willmott Dixon, which you think will actually have a real positive impact.
So I'll probably take you back to go forward. I think like a lot of companies, Gerard, we spent the last 10 years plus looking at sustainability through a lens of our own impact and looking at how we could minimize the harm we were doing. So whether that was reducing our carbon emissions, maximizing our recycling, diverting waste away from landfill, all those sorts of things. And we had a strategy that took us to 2020, and we made some massive strides against our targets. So we set ourselves a target, for instance, of reducing our carbon emissions intensity, so tons of CO2 per £1 million turnover, by 50% between 2010 and 2020. We hit that in 2017, and by the time we got to 2020, we'd reached 66%. And similarly, we'd set ourselves a 60% waste emissions, a waste arisings intensity reduction of 60%. By the end of 2020, we got to 57%. So not quite there, but by God, by setting ourselves a big challenge, we ran at it hard, and you know, I'd still count that as a success. And as we were coming into 2020, we realised that, you know, we bedded that in, and you know, we started looking to, well, we're going to need a new strategy. So from 2016 sort of onwards, we started looking at our overall emissions, and we worked with the Carbon Trust actually as part of their supply chain standard, and we did some supply chain mapping and hot spotting and what have you. The outcome was we realised that our scope 1 and 2 emissions, and some elements of employee travel around scope 3, that we'd been focusing on for 10 years actually represented 1% of the carbon emissions that we create by being in business. And what do I mean by that? We use materials in the buildings we're building. Our supply chain burn fuel in terms of their own operations to make, you know, help turn those materials into fabulous buildings for our customers. So that's embodied carbon scope 3, as well as our own emissions. That all goes into the embodied. And I mean, that's the first thing to remember, that by the time a building's in use, between 30 and 70% of its lifetime emissions are accounted for. So that's one big area of focus for us going forward. And that 99% was just our calculation on supply chain, because what we didn't do, but we, you know, really, we do realise now is that, of course, we have a responsibility to deliver brilliant buildings for our customers that are going to be brilliant through their lifetime in terms of their operation, life cycle and whole life costing. And so that's how we structured our new strategy, if you like. Our footprint bit and the ecological response is our Better Planet theme within our Now or Never strategy. But we've got a whole piece on brilliant buildings that looks at designing brilliant buildings that are brilliant in performance, but also minimise embodied carbon. And our target is that they will all be net zero carbon in use by 2030. But we're offering that to customers now with routes to do that. So, you know, there's lots of elements within that. But I think that the key thing we've done, and it's probably not the answer you were expecting me to give you, Gerard, is we've stopped contemplating our own navel, if you like, and lifted our eyes up and said, actually, this is what we're responsible for. This is what we can influence. And actually, this creates us opportunities. So just one more point, because I do ramble on, I know, but we've actually taken this opportunity and created a new part of our business, our Collider business, which is creating buildings using 70% pre-manufactured value and much offsite, but we're using the Passivhaus standard to deliver buildings that are net zero carbon in use with reduced embodied carbon. And why Passivhaus? Because it's a trusted, verifiable performance standard. It's not new. You know, I think you used the word innovation in the introduction. I believe we've got all the tools we need to use to get to 2030 and the targets we've set ourselves, certainly. I'm not saying we don't need innovation in the future, but the hardest thing for us all is to change our behaviour. So if we can get everybody to change a little bit and adopt the things we know now, by God, we can make huge strides to 2030 and then give ourselves time for that innovation to come online.
Okay, so I mean, I've seen a lot of the stuff you're doing, and particularly, I mean, the Passivhaus and that whole approach is fantastic work. Jose, you know, as a consultant, pick Everard, you know, you see a lot of projects, a lot of contractors. Do you see lots of best practice? Are you seeing other standards as well as Passivhaus? Are you seeing the move to modern methods? What are you seeing from an innovation? What tools are you using to combat this?
We have seen a number of initiatives. I think that something very important is to engage with the clients in those conversations, in establishing the brief, in making sure that that there are clear sustainability targets and requirements, which are an integral and core part of the delivery of the project. Let's remove, sustainability as one of the first value engineered aspects of a project. It's there, it's at the center, it needs to be at the core of it. Julia made a fantastic point on embodied carbon. And with the increase in decarbonization of the grid, that's only going to continue to increase the percentage of importance of embodied carbon on that. Also, in the same way as for Willmott Dixon, for Everard as designers, our own carbon footprint is a very small part of it. We need to take care of it. We need to reduce it. We need to become net zero carbon. We need to offset our emissions. We need to continue improving on that. But in as much as that is important, is what instills in our staff, is the realization of the importance of taking care of the carbon footprint, not just our own carbon footprint, but that of our projects. Technically, they may end up being the carbon footprint of someone else, but we are driving that, we're influencing that. So we are, I would say, professionally and morally responsible for that, and we need to ensure that we continue to improve on that. We signed the Climate and Biodiversity Emergency Declaration. We've joined the RIBA 2030 Challenge, Design for Performance, but those are tools and processes to ensure that make it easier for our staff and for our clients, and we're engaging with them to tell them, you need to be doing this. And we have our own supply chain as well, and those elements and those discussions need to be part of that engagement process.
That's my next question, actually. I mean, are we going to do this, or and because we always say we borrow the planet from our children and our children's children. So the next generation, I find they're extremely interested in this area. They are the ones that are driving the agenda. They're the ones on the front line. Greta Thunberg, that you mentioned, Julia, she's 18 now, I think. It feels like she's been around for many years. But I know through our own company and through my own children that they are really driving it. And I made a comment today at the Suez Recycling Conference that I find young people are interviewing me now about our company's approach to climate change, to sustainability and ESG. So that's important. I just want to pick up on two little things, then, really. Frameworks and the Construction Playbook. They're obviously, the Construction Playbook is a framework in how we should work, and then obviously frameworks are a tool you can use. Do you see the Construction Playbook, Julia, as something you're embedding in it at Willmott, and you obviously use frameworks? Do you see them as good tools?
Yes, we do. I mean, I think the benefit of frameworks is that it gives a consistent structure, it gives a consistent scope, it gives everybody the ability to line up in the same direction, and it becomes rather than a standard or a regulation, which always feel a bit like setting something that becomes the maximum and it's pushing us down. I think frameworks in that way give us something to aspire to and work out how we can build on it and use it as an opportunity for growth and alignment. And then it gives a tool to customers to compare and contrast. So it sort of levels the playing field, but actually in a way that I think feels very collaborative and positive to drive standards up rather than limit innovation and improvement.
Yeah, I see them as democratic rather than autocratic, which are hopefully what we can do. Jose, just your perspective on that. I mean, the playbook has been thrown at us by government. A lot of people contributed to it. It was released in December last year. We as one organisation are right behind it. It's what we see there. How are Pick Everard? Are you adopting it? Are you integrating it? What's your perspective?
Yes, we certainly are. We are working with all the different contractors as well. I think it's important. I think a key element in there is the references to whole life carbon. So we are seeing buildings whole life. It's our job. It's not our job, but it doesn't. Our impact doesn't stop once the building has been completed and starts being used. Where it stops is what stops then is a significant part of what maybe we could have done before to make it better. Once the building is finished, there can be improvements that can be made later on. Better to make them from the very first day. There is a point in the playbook where, however, what it refers to, it says in setting standards and specifications, contracting authorities should consider sustainability and options that support the wider priorities, including net zero by 2050 and the UN SDGs. I would have liked to see something a bit stronger than should consider. Both. I don't think it should be should, and I don't think it should be just consider. I think that local authorities need to be given or need to take the powers to enforce more robust requirements in relation to sustainability. They have their carbon budgets. They have set targets, most of them for 2030, which I'm sure that they are realizing it's a struggle, and everybody needs to act now.
Yeah, I know the clauses you're referring to, and the way I see that is affecting a change in carbon is it's not a destination, it's a journey. In the way I sort of see it, and I think that's quite important. And I think if you look at the Social Value Act, that started out as, should try and do this, and then it's become it's not mandated because that isn't the way the government works, but because the people who are now in control, sort of the Social Value Act was 2012, so it's 9 years ago. I think we'll find a similar thing as we go forward. I think it will become into more of a comply or explain, which is what modern methods are doing as well. So I can probably see that happening more, Jose. I hope so, because I think you're right on that. Okay, we've been here having a fantastic chat, and I could listen to Julia all day. Actually, I really, in fact, I listened to a couple of weeks ago on a podcast with Jonathan Porritt. So I spent some time listening to Julia, but I just want to sort of bring it back and just want a really quick answer, please, from both of you. A final question. So just very quickly, what is your top tip that you think our listeners need to consider, whether they're a client, a contractor, or a consultant? What's the top tip that they should think about in a post COP26? Julia.
You can't limit me to one, Gerard.
Oh. You can have two then. Two top tips.
Well, okay. So my top tip for customers and consultants and people at the sort of the front end of delivery is let's talk early. Picking up what Jose was saying, the earlier you have those conversations, the more possibilities you leave yourselves open to in terms of delivering a great project. My tip for perhaps members of the supply chain, SMEs that are tuning into this, would be make sure you know what you're spending on fuel and energy, because that directly relates to your carbon emissions. And that's important because only 11% of SMEs, according to the CBI, know what their carbon emissions are. Once you know what they are, you can do something about them. And particularly with the red diesel rebate going, there is a massive opportunity for you to save, increase your sustainability, protect your profit, and protect the planet at the same time.
So that's two top tips, and early engagements, which I think is right, and The playbook tells us that, and fuel energy costs, which interestingly enough, if companies look at those, they as well as saving the planet, they also save money. So so there's an opportunity there. So Jose, I'll give you 2 top tips as well, Jose.
I had condensed them into one now.
Okay.
So no, what I was going to say is to everybody, and it's regardless of the the size, the role. Don't think you are not an important part of the solution. This is a journey. I think we mentioned that word before, Gerard, you did. We are on a journey. It's a transformational journey. It's a transformational journey for companies, for societies, for economies, but at the end for people. And it needs everybody to be part of. And I think that's a powerful message. Don't use the excuse, but someone else is not doing it. If we went by that, and that's a race to the bottom, nothing would happen. And if nothing happens, something will happen. I think that there were references to climate and nature takes care of itself, and it will do it one way or another. So let's help nature do it the right way, which is much better for us.
I mean that's a great summary there, Jose. And I think a couple of points from that. We did all notice when lockdown occurred around the world, the lack of aeroplane traffic for quite some time. The whole song coming back and all of that sort of stuff. So there's a direct result. Now that was clearly that wasn't a sort of a journey we went on at that point. It was we hit a wall, didn't we, at that point, really, and that's what happened. But I think you're right. The bit I'd take out of what you said there was the whole don't think it doesn't apply to me. It's somebody else's problem. I can't make a difference. Well, you're right. Everybody can make a difference. Whatever we do every day can make a difference, and I think that's a great point. So look, I just want to say thanks to my it's been fantastic to listen to both of you today. So thank you to Julia Barrett, the Chief Sustainability Officer at Willmott Dixon, and Jose Hernandez, the Director at Everard. I just want everybody to have a good day or good evening, depending what time you're listening to this, and look out for our next podcast, which will be coming soon. So thank you to my guests, and keep listening to Pagabo's Building Blocks podcast. Thank you.